CBS News in Washington, this is the CBS News Night Watch.
Back in 1965, a record company executive listened to Frank Zappa's music and told him it had absolutely no commercial potential. Since then, he has recorded some 50 albums. Zappa has just kicked off a new American tour, his first in 3 years. He's also formed his own video company to produce and release his own unique videos. There's the man that did it. In addition to his artistic pursuits, Frank Zappa has been involved in a well-publicized battle against record censorship. Is your thing, your own feelings against television evangelist, is it just limited to certain television evangelists, or do you think the whole sort of fundamentalist movement, the ecumenical,
I'm not against I'm not against fundamentalist religion. My opinion is that the people who have this basic faith have been victimized by the guys who abuse them through the media.
So a lot of people of religious conviction and good intentions send their money away and are abused by people who receive it.
That's true.
And so what do you want to do? What's this sort of legal arm going to do other than Tammy and
as far as I know, the organization, which I am not a part of, was set up 4 or 5 years ago to assist those people who had managed to escape from fundamentalist-type cults and needed a support group to help them get over the rough times. Because when they're in the group, in the church, everyone loves them, and they're all comfy cozy, and they get out and it's like having withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah, we've had them on. They've talked about that.
Okay, so that's basically what the organization does. But the idea of the Legal Defense Fund was to help these PTL families get their money back from Jim and Tammy. Remember, they gave thousands of dollars for these condos for life, or whatever it was. And
you ain't coming down in North Carolina, Heritage USA, where they got a suite at the.
That's right.
Listen to this. One of the big songs on your new tour is "When the Lie's So Big." Yeah. It's about what?
Pat Robertson.
Give me a sense of the lyrics.
When the lie's so big, as in Robertson's case, that sinister face behind all the Jesus hurrah could result in the end to a worrisome trend in which every American not born again could be punished in cruel and unusual ways by this treacherous cretin who tells everyone that he's Jesus' best friend.
Wow. Are you taking on Pat Robertson?
Sure, anytime.
Are you worried about his political success, that he is saying something that is resonating in America?
Well, it's where it's resonating and why it's resonating that is troublesome.
Meaning what? Where is it resonating and why?
The people, and not being an expert on his constituency, but from what I can learn from watching television, and I do watch a lot of news on television, it seems that the people who are fond of what he has to say haven't looked past the front to see what is really going on behind the screen.
What's going on behind the screen?
I happen to think that he is worthy of investigation for two things. One, involvement in the Iran-Contra scandal. Yes.
How so? I mean, I have not heard this before, so it's news to my ears. But
well, I'm not the only one that has suggested that somebody look into it.
Is this because of the time he saw Oliver North at the airport? And
no, not because he saw him at an airport, because he actively promoted the whole business on his television ministry, some ministry. First of all, he's got videotape of himself reviewing Contra troops. Now, suppose you want to review the Contra troops. How do you find out where they are? Who do you call, say, get me down there with a TV crew? Can you go and stand in front? You can.
Sure.
Can I?
Sure.
I can?
Oh, sure.
I doubt it.
Oh, no, you can. Absolutely.
What, they have this group of troops waiting there to go like this with a rifle?
If you had a television broadcast, or you were a journalist writing something, and you said, look, I'd like to go down and see the troops, I'd like to go down there. I mean, you know how to call. You can call Miami. The Contras have an office down there, and they have people down there. I mean, you could make 2 or 3 phone calls in Washington to find out how you get down there.
So everybody listen to this. If you want to have your picture taken with the Contra troops, this is how you do it. Is this how Robertson did it?
I don't know how Robertson did it, but I'm just saying you could do it.
My theory is this, that he has been involved with funding for the Contras. He's been promoting the whole cause. Now, one of the things that made my eyebrows go up and down was, remember during the Contra hearings, you had the 3 people on there testifying, the people who donated. You had Coors,
right,
the lady, and the other guy on the end.
Yeah, right.
Can't remember his name.
Yeah.
He paid the $300,000 and got the Oliver North secret lecture, remember?
Right.
And Stokes said, what was the secret lecture? And they did a little rigmarole, and finally he says it.
Yeah.
Well, the results of what he described bear a very close resemblance to Pat Robertson's idea of how to win in Nicaragua. Sounds like the same thing to me, as he promoted on his show. So I have to say, did he pay $300,000 and get the secret lecture? Or did he tell his close friend, Oliver North?
Are they close friends?
Well, he says he's close friends.
Yeah.
My good friend, Oliver
Yeah, but you know, the story that came out about him is that he says that he saw Oliver North at the airport, and he was coming, I don't know whether it was Butler Aviation or somewhere here in Washington, a private airport. And as I remember it, Robertson said that North said he was going to Iran. He was going over to...
Yeah, he just sort of blabbed it out that he was going, I got a little arms deal I'm going to do, and I'll tell you, Pat, because you're close friends with Ron, so we're all in this together. What we're talking about here is xenocracy. Mysterious government, you know, Xeno.
Oh, Xeno,
stranger,
yeah, all right.
So I like democracy, not xenocracy. If you're going to have government, let's find out what the people are doing, because in the real world, in the American world, people who work in the government are your employee. You know?
All right. We got to talk about some other things, including we got to talk about this tour, and you're back to taking the guitar on this tour, I hear?
You bet.
All right. And we'll also talk about the censorship campaign, where that's going, and whether Mrs. Gore has satisfied you that she's not trying to censor, and so everything's okay with the 2 of you. Frank Zappa back in a moment. Stay with us. Frank Zappa is here. Let me just quickly talk about censorship, because I do want to talk about your music. Mrs. Gore went out there, and Senator Gore doing very well. He's got a lot of endorsements in the South. He's going to make his stand there on Super Tuesday. Has the censorship thing ended? Because she went around on this program and other places saying, look, I don't want to censor, and Frank's got it wrong. You know, all we're saying is we want a little bit of labeling there. And you're saying labeling is censorship, or what are you saying?
I'm saying that their basic premise is very far-fetched. Their premise is that labeling and everything else they've done was necessary because the mere hearing of certain words on a rock and roll record can possibly turn you into a social liability.
Yeah, but is that any different than the idea of X-rated films can turn you into something?
I mean, it's the same stupidity.
Yeah, okay, but I mean, so in other words, you're equal, you'd have an equal animus towards the rating system in movies. Keep
Yes, I do.
from seeing movies because watching television shows will make them into psychopaths.
That's right. I mean, look, you could turn into a psychopath from a number of different reasons if you were oriented to being a psychopath. You know, there are a number of unstable personalities running around this country.
Forget sex and lyrics for a second. Do you therefore assume that Rambo and all of Stallone's films and all of Arnold Schwarzenegger's films and all of those other films don't necessarily or don't in any way produce violence on the part of kids who watch them?
I won't say in any way. I think that seeing things like that, there's a difference between seeing that and the results of seeing that and seeing pornography. I think the results are different.
So you were willing to accept the idea that perhaps there can be
but I wouldn't censor either of them.
Stimulating activity from a film and not necessarily sexual activity stimulated from a film.
Because I think there probably is more evidence to indicate that violence would devolve from seeing those kinds of films rather than eroticism, you know, rampant eroticism in America evolving from pornography.
Do you think this country's turning right?
No, I think that the media is turning right. And I think that many of the people who get into office have gotten in there by wearing a pseudo middle-of-the-road kind of a costume and then lean toward the right when they find out the right is paying the freight once they get into office. Let our minds drift back to the early days right before Reagan made his big run. There was a deal made between the fundamentalist right and the Republican Party, literally purchasing the platform. If you stick the prayer in school on here, if you stick the abortion on here, money, the land of milk and honey will flow in your direction.
I mean, is that any different than politics of the Democratic Party, in which, you know, all kinds of different interest groups had certain things they wanted in the platform?
It is very different. It is very different because it is so focused and it is so wealthy and it is so protected. There's so much money involved, and I think that it has been the ruination of the GOP. You know, GOP now has, as they say...
The grand old party?
That's right. Enterprisers on one side and moralizers on the other. I'm with the enterprisers. Let's get down to business.
You're for Jack Kemp, then, on one hand, when he talks about entrepreneurial activity and all that?
The line is nice, but I'm not for Jack Kemp. You know what I mean? Yeah. What I'm saying is that if you were going to be a Republican, you ought to focus on what Republicans are supposed to be good at, which is, let's do business, okay? Yeah. And I think business is good for the whole world. People like to do business. But when you start trying to legislate morality, you've got a problem. You know, it doesn't work. It hasn't worked in the past. It won't work in the future.
Yeah, but if anything goes, there's got to be some sense of responsibility, don't you think?
There's a difference between responsibility and adherence to dogma. When the dogma becomes legislation, that's when you have the danger. I have this horrible fear that the United States could wend its way toward being a fascist theocracy, the cross converted into a symbol of fascism in the service of politics. This is bad.
You think that's why Pat Robertson's doing well out there? Some sense
I think that he's doing well because
identification with the cross?
It is the identification with the cross, the fact that he claims to be speaking on behalf of a supernatural being who has certified his campaign.
But see, the interesting thing when you say that is that he is running, he's trying very carefully to distance himself. I mean, he got into a little thing with Brokaw on election night, on the caucus night, in which he said, you know, it's religious bigotry for you, Mr. Brokaw, to call me a television evangelist. What I was a TV broadcaster, and I built. It's the notion that he wants to separate. Okay, but Frank, come on. He wants to separate himself from that religion
thing. He would love to, but the fact is, he has been a faith healer. There's videotapes of him doing faith healing. He lies about that. He's trying to distance himself.
That's trying to distance himself from. But you're saying that there's an appeal there. So why? But
look,
you see what I'm saying?
Toward the end of this little caucus race in Iowa, we saw him pulling out the religious stops. In the front part of it, he's trying to make it look like, oh, I'm only politics. I'm a broadcaster. I've made millions of dollars. I'm a good businessman. Now, you know, look at me. I can do this business for the country. And then at the end, when he had some doubts, here comes the Jesus again. I mean, he's going to pull the Jesus string again.
Democrats. You like any of the Democrats? You like Jackson?
I happen to like Cuomo. And
why do you like Cuomo? He's a traditional Democrat, is that it?
No, I am still impressed by the speech that he made at the last Democratic convention. I mean, I didn't even know Cuomo before that.
You know what's more impressive from Cuomo is the speech he made at Notre Dame about the separation. Made a wonderful speech about the separation of religion and church and state. It was probably one of the really interesting expositions on that subject, much more so than the sort of shining city on the hill speech. You like Cuomo. What about Gephardt?
I don't like Gephardt.
Why not?
I find him empty, and I think that talking that protectionist stuff is, you know, it's pandering.
How about Simon?
The best thing I can say about Simon is to quote Al Haig. you know the one about the bat dying on his chest. That's good. You know.
All right, you got a large band going out on tour.
That's right.
You're sold out wherever you go.
Yep.
You got the guitar back.
Sure do.
A lot of the oldies as well as new stuff.
Well, you know, one of the things that people are coming to see is our Republican retrospective medley, where we start with a song about Richard Nixon and take it into the future if Pat Robertson gets in, you know.
Somebody said that in Iowa there were people with Nixon masks and they were running around saying, I'm tanned and I'm ready, call me.
Well, why not?
Frank Zappa's back on tour. Night Watch continues. Back in a moment. Stay with us.
Coming up next on Night Watch, a college